One time I said, Geraldo, what is the secret to success in this industry? And he said, Jesse, keep your hair and keep your waistline. Well, so far so good, but I have a different secret, and I'll tell you guys that in a little bit. I started in the basement of Fox News, making minimum wage, no health insurance, 2 p.m. to midnight. I sat next to a girl named Candy who dotted her I with a heart. And all of a sudden I heard there was an opening on the O'Reilly Factor. I said, I got to get this job. I got to get out of the basement. So I go in for an interview with Bill, and I sit down and he sits down, and I give him my resume, and he looks at it and he says, what's your father do? I told him what my dad did, and he looks down and he's silent for a long time. And I think he forgets I'm there. And then I said, Bill, I just read your latest book. It was amazing. And all of a sudden he perks up and says, you seem like a smart kid. You start Monday. So he hired me, and then he almost fired me. We had these pitch meetings in the newsroom where we all circle around as producers and we pitch Bill's stories we think will make good TV segments. And these producers are just getting swatted down like flies. Bill's calling us idiots. It comes to me, I bomb, and the producer brings me up to his office afterwards and says, Bill doesn't think you're articulate enough to make it in television. You have 2 weeks to turn it around or you're fired. I mean, it's like telling Jordan he can't dunk. So I put my nose to the grindstone, turned it around, and I got it together. And Bill said, Jesse, you're bothering everybody in the pod. We're going to have to send you out to the streets to bother other people. He said, I want to find out how much young Americans know about current events. Turns out they know very little. Would you guys like to hear actual questions and answers from Water's World? Who did America fight in the Revolutionary War? China. Who won the Civil War? France. Who did America fight in the Vietnam War? Not a trick question. South Korea. What was the ship that the Pilgrims sailed over to America on? The Nina, the Pinta, and the Linta. Name one state that borders Canada. Philly. Not a state. I asked this one kid, what do you think about Bernie Sanders? And he said, who's Bernie Sanders? I said, I wish I didn't know either. And I said, he's the senator from Vermont. He said, what's Vermont? My all-time favorite. What do you think of the Ebola virus? It's nice. So it's funny, but it's sad because these people are oblivious, and politicians and corporations can hoodwink and bamboozle us. And this is kind of the stage that was set for me in the summer of 2015. And Hillary and Jeb were supposed to fix things. The two most boring politicians in America. Until Donald Trump came down the escalator. And I thought he was selling hats. I didn't know what was going on. And so he connects emotionally with the American people right away on immigration. And everyone's offended, but you feel it in your heart. And And so, first big event, he has the Iowa State Fair. Do you guys know what the Iowa State Fair is? There you go. So it's like regular politicians go around and press the flesh and try to act like regular people, and there's like fried food everywhere. Trump comes down in his helicopter and lands it in the middle of the Iowa State Fair, gets out in a $5,000 suit, takes a pork chop on a stick, takes a bite, and then starts giving kids rides around the Iowa State Fair in the helicopter. So right away, he like wins. And then we start going into these debates. You remember Little Marco? Lion Ted. Or my favorite he said about Mitt Romney, he said, Mitt Romney is poor and he walks like a penguin. And we're watching this at Fox and we were like, we had no idea. We had never seen anything like this before. Just like middle school ridicule. And it was working.
Yeah.
But he was connecting. And he wins the nomination and goes through the summer. And I think there's like this event right around 9/11, and Hillary's walking to her car, and all of a sudden she's walking, and then she faints. You'd faint too if you were married to Bill. So we're all tied up going into the first debate. Remember that debate? Trump's like, well, if I were president, you'd be in jail.
Yeah.
The mic. Now, Hillary didn't go to jail, but Bill might. Have you guys seen the Epstein files? No bueno. And so Trump cruises, and on election day, Hillary thinks she has it in the bag and falls asleep to get rest for her victory speech that night. She wakes up, and it's a nightmare. Trump has won Florida, North Carolina, and the next thing you know, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, he's president. So obviously, what do? I say, I got to get an interview with the president. So we call Hope. She sets it up. It's like somewhere in Tennessee. And he puts me there. There's like this big rally beforehand. O'Reilly made me work the rally beforehand, before a presidential interview. Can you believe it? And so I sit there in this holding area where we're going to do the interview. And all of a sudden, the president walks in the room. Jesse, my man, how you doing? Grabs my hand, like pulls my arm off. He goes right to the mirror, takes a whole thing of hairspray and just goes. He sits down, I sit down. He said, Jesse, you see how many people are outside? 45,000, 85,000, 125,000? A lot of people out there, Mr. President. So we sit down, we wrap the interview, and it's over, and he says, well, we're headed back to D.C. Do you want to ride on Air Force One? And I said, yeah. So next thing you know, I'm like walking up the steps of Air Force One. He puts us in like the business class section. All the fake news is in the back. And so, you know, I'm trying not to steal everything. I have sticky fingers, so like, there's like Air Force One, like M&Ms with the logo emblazoned on it, and I'm just stuffing everything in my pockets. And so all of a sudden, Hope says, all right, he's ready for you. And we bring the cameras, we bring it back into like his executive boardroom area of the jet. And I said, Mr. President, now that you're president, they're going to have to rename this Air Force One. Yeah. He didn't think it was funny either. So we wrap the interview and we go back. He tells me to put the camera away. So we're just talking. I said, Mr. President, why were you playing In Sync at your rally? That's kind of a strange choice. He goes, what do you mean? NSYNC's amazing. I said, really? He goes, yeah, Lance Bass is the man. Lance Bass? He said, yeah, Jesse, I was just at this cocktail party the other day in Manhattan, and there was this model, perfect 10, stunning, and she's next to this, like, New York Giants linebacker, okay? They're together. And all of a sudden, Lance Bass walks by, and the model leaves the linebacker and chases after Lance Bass. Lance Bass gets tail. I said, Mr. President, Lance Bass is gay. He said, he is? He said, all right, Jesse, I'm going to go talk to the failing New York Times. I'll see you later. So, Fox changes the lineup. They move me from the weekends to the 5 at that point. And so the best part about the 5 is the commercial break, because Greg is like crazy. I mean, these are things Greg's actually said. He said, Jesse, you want to know the best way to kill your wife? No, but tell me. Take her hiking. He goes, Jesse, you want to know the best way and the cheapest way to have phone sex? No, tell me. Call Victoria's Secret and ask them to go through the catalog with you. Yeah. I asked Greg if he wanted to play golf a little while back. He said, no, last time I golfed, I got injured. I said, well, what happened? Someone like shank a drive, hit you in the noggin? He said, no, I was bending over to pick up my ball, and I jabbed my golf club into my neck and ruptured my trachea. Not the manliest guy, but we love him. Janine Pirro, we miss Janine Pirro. I don't think Jessica and Harold miss her so much. Both Jessica and Harold went deaf in their right ears. Doesn't matter, they don't listen anyway. Pirro actually got her phone hacked last month. But the good news is now China's deaf. So I'm on the 5 now, and all of a sudden the phone rings. Jesse, it's your favorite president. How you doing? Just got back from 5 days in Asia. It was meeting after meeting after meeting. If Jeb were president, he would have had to have taken a nap. I said, that's crazy. He said, why don't you bring everybody from the 5 and come have dinner at the White House? And I said, even Juan? And he paused and he said, what the hell, bring Juan anyway. And so a little while later, we didn't all go. It was me, it was Sebastian Gorka, and Stuart Varney. So we go up and we get to like the second level of the residence, and the president says, you want to go see the Lincoln bedroom? I'm like, sure, I didn't have to donate anything. And so we go up there, and there's the Gettysburg Address, and like it's encased in glass. And he's standing next to it, and he says, Jesse, some people say my Twitter account is the modern day equivalent of the Gettysburg Address. I said, some people meaning you? And then we go downstairs and he shows me this other room. It's very private. He goes, see that on the wall, Jesse? That painting's a Monet. Jackie O brought it. I'm thinking about taking it with me when I leave. I said, I don't think that's a very good idea, Mr. President. He said, why not? Crooked took the silverware. It's true. So we go sit down, and like Miller's there, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, and we're having dinner. And all of a sudden, the First Lady walks into the room. And she's statuesque, she's very tall and graceful and elegant. And I had not been briefed on the protocol on how to introduce myself to the First Lady. Do I bow? Do I curtsy? I don't know. So I go in for the kiss. So I go, one cheek, and then I got greedy. Other cheek denied. So I kind of scurry back down a little embarrassed, and I sit back down, and I just change the subject and ask about the Russia hoax, and he forgets about the whole thing. And so the first term was very tumultuous. There was a lot of conflict, but like right in that late winter, early spring, Trump was just riding so high. He beat impeachment. I think Gallup had him about a 50% approval rating, and things were going well until the China virus hit and shuts down everything. Stock markets crashing, Black Lives Matter's tearing the place apart. And I'm quarantining with my wife in Manhattan, and all of a sudden the phone rings. Hello? Hey, it's Hannity. How you doing? So what's up, Sean? He goes, the president's not in a great mood. He wants some of his friends to come cheer him up at Camp David. I said, sweet. How are we getting there? He goes, we're going to take my jet. I said, nice, because I don't have a jet. Yet. So the next thing you know, it's like me, Hegseth, our wives, Hannity, Kilmeade, we're all going down there to Maryland to the woods to go see the president at Camp David. So we get there, and they have a whole perimeter set up with the Navy. Remember, this is like right at the beginning of COVID. Like no vaccines, like no one knows what it does to you, nothing. So we all have to get tested before we go in there. And the test at the time was the Abbott test. Do you guys know what that was? You guys know what a Q-tip is? Okay, there's a Q-tip about that long. And they take this Q-tip and they shove it up your nostril and then swirl it around so it like tickles your brain, makes you cry. And so you have to wait 15 minutes to get the results. Like no news is good news. So we're all just kind of knocking back drinks in the perimeter at Camp David in the woods, waiting for our test to come back good and go on in. So all of a sudden, this naval officer says, Mr. Waters, I'd like to see you over here, please. I said, what's up? Walk over. He said, Mr. Waters, sorry to inform you, but you've tested positive. I said, positive for what? He said, you've tested positive for COVID-19, sir. And at the time, we didn't know what it did. Like, was I going to lose my hair? Was I going to grow a third nipple? I was a little scared, but I was most worried about how I was getting home. I can't take the jet back because I have COVID, and there's no Hertz rental cars in the woods in Maryland. So I start sweating. I don't know what to do. All of a sudden, the naval officer says, sorry, Mr. Waters, but Mr. Hegseth put me up to this. I look over, Pete's laughing at me. He smoked me like a Coke boat. I'll get him back. And so we all hop in the golf cart and we go into the woods and we meet the chaplain. The chaplain puts us on a golf cart and takes us on a little tour, and he's showing us all the scenes. This is where Bush put in the horseshoe pit. Over here is where Eisenhower installed the par-3 chipping green. And see up on that little deck out there on that, there's a hot tub. Guess which president installed the hot tub? Bill Clinton. If hot tubs could talk. And so, then we freshen up, we put jackets and ties on, and, we go have dinner, and Robert Kraft was there, the owner of the Patriots, and he starts giving a toast. Boo! Go Eagles. Hey, we won last year. Let us have something. So Kraft starts speaking, he's got the mic, and all of a sudden, and he sneezes near Trump. And Trump, he jumps up and stiff arms Kraft like Gronkowski and runs out of the room. I've never seen a man move like that his age. And so, and everyone's laughing, and Kraft's a little humiliated. But Trump comes back and he grabs the mic and just takes over the speech, and he's like, I tried to set Ivanka up with Tom Brady, and Ivanka's right there with Jared. And Jared's beat red. And Trump's like, Jared can't throw a spiral to save his life, but boy, can he get us those ventilators. So we finish up dinner, and Trump wants to watch a movie. And if the president wants to watch a movie, that's what you do. So remember, he doesn't drink. Thank God. And so we go into the movie theater area of Camp David, and there's this popcorn machine. Trump just goes right for the popcorn, fills it all up, goes and sits down. And those commercial grade salt canisters, they're blue with the white top, the aluminum little thing you kind of hurt your fingernail when you peel it back, the lip. He sits down, he's got the popcorn like this, and he's got the salt like this. And he's pouring a steady stream of salt forever onto the popcorn. And I'm like, this must be the diet of a very stable genius. So then the lights dim. My wife sits next to him. He's on the corner. I sit next to my wife. And as the lights dim, he leans over to my wife, Emma, and says, "Do you sleep naked?" So I don't know what to do. I got to defend my honor here, but there's Secret Service everywhere. And so I said to I said, "Emma, what did he just say to you?" And she says, "Oh," he said, "is Sleepy Joe going to make it?" Do you sleep naked? Is Sleepy Joe going to make it? It's like, thank God. You got to listen. And so the funny thing is, Sleepy Joe did make it. The only guy to sleep his way to the top. So Biden gets in, and Fox kind of rejiggers the lineup again, and they put me at 7 o'clock. So I start calling people for advice. I'm like, thank you. I'm like, I call O'Reilly. He's like, "Jesse, just don't be boring." Okay. I call Bob Costas. Costas says, "Just stay relaxed." I call Tucker. Tucker just says, "Don't lose your sense of humor." I call Scaramucci. He says, "Buy Bitcoin." And then I call Britt Hume, and Britt Hume says, "Jesse, don't sleep with your assistant." I said, "Don't worry, my assistant's a guy." Not that there's anything wrong with that. And so, I'm really hustling. It's 7 o'clock show. I'm off the weekends. I got a show at 5. I got a show at 7. I'm trying my hardest. I'm like waking up at 5 a.m. I'm grinding, working out, in office early, sitting, reading, writing. All of a sudden, I'm shaving one day in the bathroom and my back goes out. And I'm in agony. I'm like crawling and hoist myself on the bed. And we have to call 911. It's that bad. So the emergency services team comes up, puts me on like a stretcher, get down to the elevator. I'm in the Upper East Side at the time, and they wheel me out of my apartment. I gave them like the thumbs up, like I was an injured quarterback coming off the field. Like, I'll be back. They put me into the ambulance, and I'm in serious agony. And, I'm just trying to make small talk with the EMT, and I'm like, wow, you must do some crazy stuff, your job. And he goes, yeah, I was just in the Epstein cell. I said, what? He said, yeah, we were the first EMT team on the scene when Epstein killed himself. And it was really weird. I said, well, what do you mean it was really weird? What was weird? And he says, well, when we got to the jail cell, there was like 10 people in the cell. And they were like touching things, like touching the body and moving the body all around. And I'm like trying to get up. I'm like, I'm going into the office. We're going live. This is like the biggest scoop of my career. And the next thing you know, I'm like wheeled into the emergency room. I don't even get this guy's number. I know. And so, they put me in there, they give me an MRI, and then I see this surgeon like a couple days later, and he said, what happened to your back? And I said, well, I've been carrying the 5 for years. Not true. And so he said, no, seriously, like, what's your routine? Like, let me see a picture of your office chair. And then I text my assistant, Johnny, I'm like, send me a picture of the chair. I show him the picture, and he's like, look at this chair, Jesse. This chair is crooked. This chair has destroyed your back. You know who put my chair together? My assistant, Johnny. Now I'm definitely not sleeping with him. And so he's like, Jesse, sitting is the new smoking. The human body was not designed to sit all day. That's true. And I'm looking at your images, and you're like this close to like permanent nerve damage. So we do the surgery, and all of a sudden I'm back. I'm like walking, I'm stretching, I'm Maha, baby. And then Fox changes the lineup a little bit again, and Tucker leaves, and they bump me up to 8 o'clock. And so I call Tucker for advice, and he hangs up. I'm just kidding. He said, Jesse, every day you want to take a sauna to relax. And then he said, also, don't read what the media writes about you, which in Tucker's case is very good advice. And so, right around this time, lawfare kicks in, right? Like they raid Mar-a-Lago and rifle through Melania's underwear drawer like a bunch of pervs. And, they indict him in Washington, they indict him in New York. Fannie gets him. And so I saw the president on the golf course right after that, and I said, Mr. President, my wife saw your mugshot. She says you look fierce. And he goes, Jesse, let me tell you what happened. I get in there. Guy goes, click. I go, can I see it? He says, no. I go, can we do another? He says, no. I go, uh-oh. So I'm riding back on the jet, and my lawyer shows me a picture of what I look like. First thing I do, I call Melania. And I said, baby, I know who's going to do our Christmas card. It's the Fulton County Jail photographer.
Yeah.
And he's like, did you see me on Tucker? 100 million people watched. It was bigger than when Oprah interviewed Michael Jackson and he was saying, I did not touch those little boys. A lot of people watching. But at this time, when he was assaulted by all these lawyers, his numbers were going up. And in that spring, his lead on Biden was bigger than it ever was. So the Biden team had to do something dramatically different. So what they decided to do is challenge him to an early debate in June. They had to change the trajectory of the race, or some people think his team purposely blew Joe up so they had enough time to swap in another nominee. So Biden, he goes to study at Camp David, and later we found out he just slept the whole week. And then you saw when he walked out onto the debate stage, he was white as a ghost. And what does he say the first 20 minutes? We finally beat Medicare. Johnny and I were watching at Fox, like our heads hit the ceiling. It's over. White men can jump. And so the coup starts closing in, and he has to pass this big test. They had this big thing on a Friday with NATO. He just had to pass that without screwing up, and he could survive. And he comes to the podium and he said, I'd now like to introduce Vladimir Putin. I mean, Vladimir Zelensky. That's like confusing Maxine Waters with Jesse Waters. No relation. So all of a sudden, the coup is like right around his neck. George Clooney comes in, Barack sent him in, and Nancy and Schumer twist the knife. But Joe got the last laugh. Joe, right after he dropped out, endorsed Kamala an hour later and just stuck the party with her. And so what does she do? Kamala doesn't pick Mayor Pete for VP because he's too gay. So instead, she picks Tampon.
Yeah.
I'm
Wonder
sure
why
that
he
makes a lot of
lost.
sense. And so, also, like, it was all happened in the same week. Butler, Trump almost dies. And remember, they asked for a drone, denied. They asked for more manpower, denied. This guy's running around with a rangefinder, and they're playing cat and mouse with him, and they let Trump go on stage, which is absolutely crazy. And so the only reason he survived was God. So Trump now has God on his side, and he has J.D. Vance, which is good. So that's the ticket. And so Trump rolls into that debate with Kamala, and, you know, it's actually kind of like they were hitting each other pretty good. Kamala was holding her own. Trump was winning on points, and all of a sudden he said, these Haitians, they're eating the dogs, they're eating the cats. And I'm watching at Fox with, like, Brett Baer and the Hard News team, and they're like, what just happened? Like, oh my God. And people didn't get it at the time, but like the next day, all everybody was talking about was illegal aliens, Haitians, and they made it a meme. They're eating the dogs, they're eating the cats. Eat the dogs, eat the cats. I thought it was catchy. My mom hates it when I sing that. I'm sorry, Mom. And so, you know how when like punt returners are like taking it to the house and like no one's near them and they start celebrating before they get across the goal line? That's what Trump starts doing. Like he's feeling himself. Like he puts on the McDonald's apron. He puts on the garbage man vest. He's having fun. And then he smokes her in every swing state. And now Donald Trump has been a part of the biggest upset victory of all time, the most controversial election of all time, and the greatest comeback of all time. And so the first thing he does is Doge. And I'm like, I got to get an interview with the Doge boys. So we go into the Eisenhower building, and like Elon Musk is there with like 40 dudes eating pizza, listening to classic rock. I'm like, whoa. And I introduced myself to Elon and Big Balls. And so Elon, he grabs this like humongous box of Swiss chocolate. And he starts like offering it to me in this very mysterious way. Like he's enticing me with the chocolates. He's like showing it to me like, do you want some chocolates, Jesse? Just lost my mic. And he's like seducing me with the chocolates. And I'm thinking like, now I know why this guy's got so many baby mamas. So we get in there, and Big Balls and Musk are telling me, like, we're spending $2 million on sex changes in Guatemala, $20 million on Iraqi Sesame Street, and like $100,000 on a DEI opera in Ireland. What American is watching that opera? Only Rosie O'Donnell. So Musk has a little bit of a tiff with the president, but they patch things up where? At the Arizona Memorial for Charlie Kirk. That's God again. And so, you know, the president invited us again, my wife and I, on Air Force One, very grateful. And he said, you know, Jesse, the guy that shot me had a perfect SAT score. The guy that shot Charlie had straight A's. Smart people hate me. And I'm like, I must be an idiot. Because I love you. And so we're on Air Force One, and Oz is there, the doctor, and he's telling me the history. We modeled Air Force One after the Saudi royal jet, so they had a operating room on there in case anyone needed surgery. And Dr. Oz says, Jesse, from Arizona to DC, I could perform 16 vasectomies. I said, only on Elon? And then Trump's so excited, he loves to show stuff off, so he's like bringing us back to like the private quarters of the jet. He's like, see, Jesse, that's the bedroom area, there's the bathroom. I said, Mr. President, did you ever sleep in the bed? He goes, Jesse, I've slept in thousands of beds in my life, but never that one. I said, do you mind if my wife and I sleep with it? And he looks at me and he goes, do it passionately. Oh my God. And so he brings us over to like the executive room, and he sits down, we're having like Mexican food. He goes, Jesse, you want to see the rendition of the big, beautiful ballroom? I said, sure, let me see it. He rolls the whole thing out. And guys, I don't know if you know this, the ballroom is huge. Like, I said, Mr. President, the ballroom is 4 times the size of the White House. He said, Jesse, it's a monument. I'm building a monument to myself because no one else will. So a couple weeks after, we were at the White House for the Medal of Freedom ceremony for Charlie, where Erica received it so gracefully. And I walk in, I see O'Reilly. And then I see Tucker on the other side. And I'm like, wait a second. These are the 3 guys at 8 o'clock. I got to get a picture. So I go over to Tucker. I said, Bill's over there. We got to get a picture. He said, okay. So I bring Tucker over to kind of like the middle. And then I go over to Bill. I said, Bill, Tucker's over there. Like, we got to get this picture. And he goes, you bring Tucker to me. He bigfooted him. So I go tell Tucker to come over, and Tucker's laughing. And we go over, we take a picture with Bill. And then Beck comes in. So it's like me, Beck, Tucker, O'Reilly, the legends. And then a legend in his own mind. And then I'm thinking to myself, wait a second. All these guys have been fired from Fox except me, and all these guys don't drink except me. The secret to my success is drinking. Greg doesn't drink, so he'll probably be going next. So I only told Erica Kirk this. Greg, me, and Harold Ford Jr. have formed a Bible study group. What is going on? Harold's like a black Democrat Baptist. I'm a C&E Christian. I only go to church on Christmas and Easter. Gutfeld's either Jewish or an atheist or Catholic. I don't know what the heck he is. But Charlie's death just it made me want to reconnect with God. So Harold Ford has given us this book of Bible passages, and there's a Bible passage each day. So every morning we all read this Bible passage, and then we text each other about what we think of it. It's the most beautiful thing in the world. And the lawyers at Fox love it that we're texting about Jesus instead of, the other stuff. And I'm learning more about Jesus, and just from these short passages. And if you guys could tell me, what is the main message of Jesus in one word? Love. Love. And I'm realizing that the government will not protect what you love. You have to do it. You cannot rely on the government to protect what you love. And so, let's have everybody stand up right now for what they love. Now, if you love your spouse, you love your country, you love your heritage, your people, your faith, your God, your land, your ideas, your beliefs, your history, and you stand up for that, and you have the courage, like Charlie Kirk, to stand up and protect what you love. Turning Point, I love you. Thank you so much. And always remember, I'm Waters, and this is my world.